I see that Verona is here, Campo is here, San Pasqual is here, County, Caltrans, Sandag, NCTD. How far are we away from a quorum, Jane?
We need one more. I'm looking in the attendees.
Oh,
There's Viejas. Great.
so,
Yep.
Viejas, San Pascual.
Yes, we have Verona, Jamul, Viejas, San Pasqual, and Jamul.
And Ray is here from Viejas. Is he saying in the
Yes.
chat? Okay. And that's a quorum?
Yes.
Perfect. Are we waiting for anybody else, or shall we, is everybody ready to start the meeting? It's 10:01 on the 10:02.
Yeah. I don't reckon Victor Avina. I'm not sure if he's from a tribe or not. It's the only name I don't recognize.
Victor, can you identify yourself?
Let me give him.
Hi, my name is Victor Avina. I'm here on behalf of AT&T. I'm interested in the digital equity strategy, item 8.
Super.
Okay. Well, very good. I think we have a quorum like you mentioned, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's 10:03 now. And welcome everybody to the Interagency Technical Working Group. We have established a quorum, and I would like to review the process for both the working group members as well as members of the public who wish to speak under public comment. So for the working group members, when you would like to speak, please raise your hand, and you have control of your video and mute, so please turn on your camera when you'd like to speak, and I'll call on you and with Jane's assistance. And if you are representing your tribe today, please rename yourself by adding your abbreviated tribe name. So do we have any questions before we continue? Okay, so Jane, can you go over and remind everybody how public comments will work?
Sure. Yes, as noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda, in addition to emailed comments, the public also may provide live comments during today's meeting. To provide a live verbal comment during the meeting, please join the Zoom meeting either by computer or phone. At the time for public comments, members of the public are advised to, quote, raise their hand if you wish to provide comments. The raise hand feature could be found on the Zoom toolbar for those who are joining via computer, or by entering *9 for those joining via telephone only. The chair will call on members of the public by name for those joining via computer, and by the last 3 digits of your telephone number for those joining via telephone. All comments received prior to the close of the meeting will be made part of the meeting record. The instructions for providing live comments also are on the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the homepage of Sandag's website at www.sandag.org. Chair, thank you very much. That's all.
Oh, thank you, Jane. So we were hoping to be able to meet in person at Viejas, and thank you so much, Viejas, for your gracious offer. However, we're back here virtually just to make sure everybody can participate, because feedback is important. Let's go ahead and start off first with welcome and introductions. If you don't mind, everybody, I would like to start us off in a blessing. I've never given the blessing here at this level, but I would like to start us off that way this morning. Creator, I thank you for this beautiful day. I thank you for bringing us together to discuss important topics. Creator, watch out for our communities, watch out for our people, bring home our missing and murdered Indigenous people and relatives. Bless our communities with good health and peace. And let's have a really good discussion today and be respectful and have a good day. Thank you, Creator.
Oh,
Okay, let's start off with introductions as well. So all the group members, I'd like to take this opportunity for working group members to introduce themselves and the tribes that they represent. Verona,
hi, I'm Ray Welch, the chairman of Verona.
Viejas. Ray is only available via chat, so I know Ray Tehran is on, so hello, Ray. San Pasqual.
Good morning, Dave Martinez, Director of Public Works.
Good morning, Dave. Has any other member joined us that could introduce themselves? Jane, do you see anybody?
Yes, there's someone, attendees. Let me see. It's from Stephanie Ortega from San Pasqual.
Yes. Hi, I'm Stephanie Ortega with the San Pasqual Planning Department.
Hi, Stephanie, welcome.
And there's another member of San Pasqual that it says San Pasqual BC. Trying to see who that is.
I see Dave Martinez has his hand raised. Dave, do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, the other party should Mark Schultz, our COO from San Pasqual. I'm not sure why he can't be seen at the moment.
Chairwoman Pinto, you got Chairman Cope and council on as well.
Chairman Cope, how are you? It's good to hear you.
How are you, young lady?
Good.
How are you, Jane?
Wonderful. Thank you, Chairman.
Good, good.
Okay. So are there any public comments or questions? Because I know we have to do public comments after every item, correct, Jane?
Correct.
Okay. Any public comments or questions? No?
No, I don't see any.
Seeing none and hearing none, we'll move on to item number 3, which is approval of 2 sets of meeting minutes. The first meeting minutes are from September 29th, 2021. Hopefully everybody has had the opportunity to review the meeting minutes. And we can do them one at a time, or we can do them both at a time, at the same time. So there's September 29th and then December 1st, 2021.
Yes, we can do them both at the same time.
Okay, great. So working group members, whenever you feel comfortable, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve both sets of meeting minutes.
We need a motion.
Motion to approve by
Ray
Viejas.
Tehran.
Yes, thank you, Ray. Do I hear a second?
Second by Verona.
Second by Verona. I appreciate that, Verona. So the motion on the floor is to approve the sets of meeting minutes that we have of September 29th, 2021 and December 1st, 2021. And that was seconded by Verona. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Jane, do we have to conduct a roll call vote?
Yes, we do.
Do you want to call the vote?
Yes. So Verona,
Aye.
Hamul,
Aye.
Viejas. Yes, he's in the chat. San Pasqual,
Yes.
And that's it.
Great. Motion carries. Any public comments?
I do not see any public comments.
Awesome. Let's continue right along. We have a lot to get to today, it looks like. So I have a real quick report. First and foremost, I want to mention that our friend Andrew Orozco has moved on from San Pasqual, and he'll be working on the NTIA Broadband Grant Program. We appreciate everything Andrew's done and wish him the best in the future. He'll be an asset to anywhere he goes. I have an announcement too from the NAC meeting. Director Tokes Amashakan has also moved on, and he is now with the California State Transportation Agency. He was an awesome director. He'll be missed. And currently at the moment, we have an interim director at Caltrans. His name is Stephen Keck. Secondly, the Cultural Resources Subcommittee has continued on for the last 18 months. It's a subcommittee of Caltrans made up of over 70 different tribal representatives, and they are discussing how Caltrans's projects can impact our cultural resources. And as far as I understand, they're having a lot of progress, talking about MOUs between the tribes and the states on cultural monitoring. We just want Caltrans to be respectful of the projects and also of our resources that they uncover during any constructions or any road projects. So I'm just really appreciative to be a part of those discussions, and also that Caltrans has really taken the lead on showing that respect for the tribes, because anywhere in California, really, it's tribal land. So anywhere you're going to uncover something, whether it's our precious resources or remains, and we just want those back in our possession. So my hat's off to Caltrans for taking those leads. And that concludes my set of reports, and I'll turn it over to Antoinette for her set of reports. Antoinette?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Good morning, all. My name is Antoinette Meyer. I know some of you over the years. I've attended this working group's meetings and presented on items, but now I am really honored and excited to be your new co-chair. So we've recently gone through a reorganization at Sandag, and Colleen Clemenson, who you know very well and has been the co-chair for the last couple of years, she's moved up now into our deputy CEO role. And I've taken on the role of Senior Director of Regional Planning. I am not new to Sandag. Like I said, I've been around. I've served in various roles over the last 13 years. Most recently, I was the Director of Innovation for Sandag. And we've merged mobility and innovation with the planning department. So our regional planning department is now a bit larger. Just a few updates that I want to share with you for items that aren't on your agenda. First is related to the 2021 regional plan. Shortly after your last meeting in December, it was adopted by our board, December 10th. We very quickly received federal approval of the plan, which is great news. And now we're waiting the state approval, which we expect within the next month. So hopefully by the time we meet again, we'll have news that CARB has also approved the plan. Also wanted to let you know, last fall, our board approved what's called a Youth Opportunity Pass program. This will provide free transit passes to all youth 19 years old and under in San Diego County over a 14-month period. And we're kicking off our outreach and pass distribution starting in April. And then the program officially launches May 1st. And we would, of course, love your help getting the word out to the youth. And we can follow up with more information via email. Over the last couple of months, many of our bike projects from our bike plan have opened, and we've had some great events to celebrate these projects, gotten a lot of good media coverage. This includes our 4th and 5th Avenue bikeways, our Georgia and Meade bike projects, and also related to bikes, I wanted to let you know that after a 2-year hiatus, Bike to Work Day will be back on May 19th. You can register online. Again, we'd love to get your help promoting that. If you register, you get your free t-shirt, but the event itself is on May 19th this year. And at this time, when gas prices are astronomically high, all-time high, I want to remind you all of our iCommute program, and specifically our Vanpool incentive program. So iCommute is the transportation demand management program here at Sandag. They work with employers around the county to develop and implement what we call commuter benefit programs, which are essentially like incentives to encourage employees to take an alternative to driving, transit, carpool, vanpool. And our great Vanpool program is a really great option for longer commutes in areas that are not well served by transit. We offer a $400 a month subsidy for qualifying vanpools. This offsets the cost of the lease for the van. And in addition, right now to that normal $400 a month subsidy, we're offering $599 for the first month. So I know in the past, we've had a number of Vanpool groups of employees at some of the large casino resorts. And I just want to let you all know that this service is available. iCommute's happy to come meet with your employees, help form van pools, help form carpools, so that your employees can save some money on high commuting costs. We also have a program called Try Transit. So if that works, if there's transit options available to your employees, we provide the first month of transit free to help someone get used to taking transit, comfortable with taking transit. And we've had a pretty good success rate with that program. About more than half of the people who enroll end up continuing to take transit afterwards. So those are my updates. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thanks very much, Antoinette. Jane, do you see anybody's hand up? Any members or public?
I do not see any hands up.
Okay, well, thank you, Antoinette, and welcome.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Happy to be here.
So we will move on to item number 5, which is the REAP 2.0 overview and discussion. It's all about affordable housing. Sandag is preparing to receive up to $43 million in grant funding from California Department of Housing and Community Development through the Regional Early Action Plan, which is REAP 2.0, to implement 2021 regional plan and to help further affordable and fair housing throughout the region. So Marissa is going to be, I'm going to hand the floor over to Marissa to discuss this, and also Tueri and staff from Department of Housing and Community Development. The floor is yours, ladies.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, and good morning, members. I'm Tueri Faola, and I manage our Sustainable Communities team here at Sandag, and we're happy to have our state partners here with us today to talk about the Regional Early Action Planning Program, REAP, as you see here on the screen, 2.0. Sandag has been involved in housing regionally, for a long time. Primarily, our role has been developing the regional housing needs assessment, and we are starting to expand what Sandag is able to do in terms of housing with funding that we've received from the state, and also really with the adoption, as Antoinette mentioned earlier, of our 2021 regional plan and how we can look at accelerating the housing production within the region and also meeting some of our goals for reducing climate impacts, as well as focusing on improving our land uses in and around the infrastructure that we proposed in the plan. So I'd like to turn it over to Marissa with Housing and Community Development, HCD, who will walk through this funding opportunity. It is a unique opportunity for not only here at San Diego, but around the state, but she'll specifically talk about the funding opportunity for the tribes and what it entails for you. So Marissa, I'll turn it to you now.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to speak with you all today. So I'm Marissa Prossi, a housing policy manager in our land use division at the California Department of Housing and Community Development, and the program manager for REAP 2.0. Next slide, please. So like I said, I'm the program manager for REAP 2.0 from HCD, but REAP 2.0 is a program run by a collection of 4 state agencies. And so as shown on the screen here, HCD is the convener and facilitator of our REAP 2.0 interagency work group. And we're joined with staff and colleagues from the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, OPR, the California Strategic Growth Council, SGC, and the California Air Resources Board, CARB. And so as I'll get into, REAP 2.0 tries to address a number of issue areas together. And so as a result, it's really helpful to have the expertise from these different agencies working together and creating this program. Next slide, please. So a quick overview of what REAP 2.0 is. So it's a $600 million new grant program as part of the California Comeback Plan and funded under AB 140. So 500 million of those dollars are coming from the federal government coronavirus fiscal recovery fund, and then 100 million of the dollars are coming from the state general fund. As I'll kind of touch on briefly, the federal dollars have a few additional kind of criteria to how those dollars are spent, which kind of shapes how the program works. So, the program supports projects across the state that help create additional homes near daily destinations by supporting infill housing production and affordability goals, investing resources equitably under affirmatively furthering fair housing or AFFH, and reducing vehicle miles traveled or VMT. So a little background on where this program came from and why the state chose to invest in REAP 2.0. So it comes from, a recognition that the state is not on track to meet its housing and climate goals, as well as a recognition of the co-benefits of planning for housing in ways that reduce VMT for public health, equity, land conservation, and economic goals, in addition to addressing housing and climate crises. In addition, HCD has been administering what was the Regional Early Action Planning Grants of 2019, or as we're now calling it, REAP 1.0, and recognizing the success of that program. REAP 1.0 is different than REAP 2.0 in a few significant ways, one of which was that it was a much smaller pot than REAP 2.0, and it had much narrower uses that really focused on housing planning. So kind of the combination of the success of REAP 1.0, the state surplus of funds, as well as the coronavirus aid package, led to the California legislature making this big investment in REAP 2.0 in regions in 2021. So kind of a little overview of where we're at and kind of a little more detail on what the program is trying to do. So we're more than halfway through the program development stage of REAP 2.0. So last fall, we put out an initial framework paper and survey to get input on initial broad concepts, and we received over 65 detailed responses. What's exciting is that last week we released our draft guidelines for the program. There are two different sets of draft guidelines, which I'll get into in a little bit more. There's a few different buckets of funding, but there are draft guidelines for MPOs as well as draft guidelines out for non-MPO counties in rural areas of the state, as well as tribal entities. So currently we are in the draft guidelines public comment period, which will close on Friday, April 18th. And so we're really excited to get feedback and comments on those draft guidelines. So the program itself is, the main recipients of the funds are regional planning agencies, counties and rural areas not a part of regional planning agencies, and tribal entities. The grant program, unlike 1.0, it funds both planning and implementation activities. And the program is trying to meet a few different program objectives. These are, accelerating infill development that facilitates housing supply, choice, and affordability, affirmatively furthering fair housing, coronavirus economic recovery, and reducing vehicle miles traveled. In addition, the program has an emphasis on transformative projects. So things that will really kind of address these things together and meaningfully forward our land use practices and housing to meet the moment in terms of our housing and climate crises. So this is oftentimes people's favorite slide, talking about the money itself. So like I said, there are, as laid out in AB 140 statute, there are essentially three buckets of funding for REAP 2.0. So the largest bucket of funding is allocated for MPOs like Sandag on an over-the-counter allocation basis based on projected population estimates for 2030. And so that is of the 600 million, 510 million going directly to MPOs. So that's that, large blue slice of the pie here. Next, if we think about it as, let's say, this 5% of the light blue, 5% of the 600 million or 30 million is set aside for those rural non-MPO counties, as well as tribal entities on a competitive set-aside basis to apply directly to the state for that funding. And then so those are the two draft guidelines for each of those buckets of funding that we put out last week. The third bucket of funding is this competitive higher impact transformative bucket, also 5% or 30 million. And so that program and NOFA will be, notice of funding availability will be released a little later in this year, likely towards the end of the summer. And then there's 30 million to round it out for HCD and its state partners to administer the program and provide technical assistance. So this is just a quick slide to kind of show, the path forward for ways that tribes can access the funding. So like where I mentioned, SANDAG has a little over 43 million. The slide is small, apologies here. But thinking of that 510 million or 85% of the funds, based on population, SANDAG is receiving a little over 43 million. And then in that second bucket of funding for those non-MPO counties and rural parts of the state, as well as tribal entities, in our draft guidelines, we're proposing that 25% of that bucket, or 7,500,000, is set aside for tribal entities across the state to apply directly to HCD to access those funds. These are draft guidelines, so this is, public comment here. It's not final until final guidelines come out, likely in towards the end of May. But that is what is proposed in our draft guidelines here. So this is kind of just describing what I said verbally, but there are a couple of different ways that essentially tribes in the San Diego region can, work with the REAP 2.0 program through SANDAG, and their 43 million in change allocation, as well as potentially applying directly to the state under that tribal rural allocation set aside. Great. So as far as, what the program, entails, as far as, the things that the dollars need to be used for. So essentially each application should satisfy housing, BMT reduction, AFFH goals, in all of the proposed uses together. And then for the MPO applicants, they also need to show that nexus to pandemic recovery because of the federal dollars. And there's a lot more detail on this in our draft guidelines that we came out, and happy to answer questions there as well. So like I mentioned, 500 million of the program is funded by the state and local fiscal recovery funds of those federal COVID-19 relief dollars, which have its own requirements. Like I said, the draft guidelines talk a little bit more about this, but essentially it's meant to address the negative economic impacts of COVID-19. And as a result, the federal dollars have a little bit of a narrower list of eligible uses. But this only applies to the MPO bucket of funding. If tribes wish to apply directly to the state, those are intended to be funded by the general fund, and so those additional requirements would not be the case in that bucket of funding. Essentially, with the federal dollars, there's limitations on transportation uses. Only certain types of transportation uses can be funded, and then as well as there's additional reporting requirements. Great, so possible uses of funds. So these are the broad categories listed in statute. Again, some of these can only be funded by the general fund dollars, not the federal dollars, but these are accelerating infill housing development, realizing multimodal communities, shifting travel behavior by reducing driving, and increasing transit ridership. You know, the REAP 2.0 is meant to be a flexible program. A lot of different things can be eligible uses as long as they show a strong nexus to those program objectives listed on the previous couple slides of accelerating infill housing development, affirmatively furthering for housing, and reducing VMT. Great. And so, you know, in thinking about, you know, potential uses for tribal entities, so, you know, this could include things such as infrastructure investments to ready sites for affordable housing development and other pre-development costs. You know, it could be, you know, affordable housing development in infill areas, you know, things to connect new housing to daily services through non-motorized transportation assets like bike lanes or pedestrian improvements. As well as, you know, those non-motorized transportation programs and infrastructure investments that support new housing. So I just wanted to kind of highlight some of the things, you know, this is one of my first presentations where it's a group of both the MPOs as well as the tribal kind of stakeholders together. You know, I've done presentations to MPOs and done presentations to tribes, but combining it. So I just wanted to kind of also highlight the engagement that we've done across the state for tribal engagement to date on REAP 2.0. And then on the next slide, I'll kind of detail the things that we've heard from those engagements. So in November, we put out our framework paper and survey that closed in December. And then in December, we held 4 office hours and 1 listening session to start to get feedback on that framework paper and survey and start to inform some of our work. In January, we held a tribal consultation on the framework paper, which then directly informed our draft guidelines. Today's meeting, and then in April, we have 2 office hours on the draft guidelines planned. Great, so for time's sake, I won't read everything on this slide. But, you know, this kind of details some of the things that we've heard from tribes from that past engagement and things that then influence, you know, how we wrote the draft guidelines. So, for example, you know, we heard that in the non-MPO county rule, as well as tribal bucket of funding, you know, there was a suggestion for a tribal only set aside. And so as a result, that led to the 25% of that bucket of funding being set aside for tribes. You know, I think there were, you know, feedback certainly on the types of technical assistance that may be needed. And so our tribal affairs team at HCD is starting to think through this once we get into summer and the application period to be prepared for that. And then, you know, some of the efforts of trying to have trainings or make connections between tribes and MPOs, especially in other parts of the state where they don't have working groups such as this at Sandag. So, you know, there's more detail there. Happy to talk more about that and share that. But those are some of the things we've started to hear. But really, you know, we're really eager for additional feedback on the draft guidelines during this public comment period and have those 2 office hours set up for that as well.
Marissa, some of the questions that are being asked in the chat is there any way that the tribes can go back? First of all, how many tribes have actually participated in the consultation? I saw that you had a consultation a few months ago and it says a tribal consultation. Was there many tribes?
Yeah, so I can get back to you on the exact number of the breakdown of, but I think overall attendance for that meeting was in the 60s or 70s. And so, you know, there were some, you know, state staff in that meeting, but certainly a number of tribes there as well. So I can check with our folks that are helping to lead some of our tribal efforts and get back to you on that number.
And also, is there a way for us to go back and increase the tribal set aside?
I mean, I think certainly during the public comment period, if that's a concern, to send us public comments on that. You know, I can't make any promises on that. I think the rural tribal bucket of funding is, also has to serve all of the rural counties, not in MPOs across the state. And so we're balancing a number of kind of competing priorities there. But if there's, I think they're draft guidelines. And so, we're eager for public input there.
Yes, we would like you to increase the tribal set aside, given that we are disadvantaged communities. Could you take that message back?
I can, yeah.
Okay, and I'm sure we will submit writing also, comments in writing. Any other, are you finished, Marissa?
I think there were just a couple slides of, what's coming down, with our public comment period, but we can, if we're short on time, we can skip them. And I can put links in the chat to where the draft guidelines are, and, things that would be particularly helpful for the public comment period.
And perhaps, Marissa, if you could send an email with that information as well, I can forward it to the e-list for the tribal nations.
Sure thing, yeah.
That would be helpful. Thanks, Jane. Thanks, Marissa. Any questions or comments for Marissa? Jane, is anybody's hand raised in the chat?
There was a comment from Viejas that you mentioned, and there was a specific asking for the tribal set aside to be raised to 35%.
Okay.
There's another, hang on, there's someone just raised their hand. Arnold San Miguel from SCAG. Hang on, let me, there we go.
Oh, thank you, Jane. Appreciate it. Hey, quick question. That 7.5 million, is that for the whole state or is that just for the Sandag region?
That is for the whole state. So we have 30 million to cover all of the rural counties, not in MPOs across the state, as well as tribal entities in the state. And so that was laid out, that 30 million was laid out by the legislature. But, of the 43 million that Sandag is receiving, we certainly, expect or encourage Sandag to be doing outreach with tribal stakeholders in their region in the priority setting for how they use those $43 million. And so, and potential for sub-allocation there. So, in our draft guidelines, there's nothing that would, there's the, there are all of the federal kind of rules of that, the federal dollars there, and having to be compliant with the federal guidelines on those dollars, but certainly from HCD's perspective, wanting to facilitate in whatever way we can to make sure that tribes access those funds.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
If you don't mind, if I just provide an additional comment related to what Marissa said, we are just getting together from Sandag's perspective. We're starting to look at the guidelines related to the federal dollars and seeing how that applies to the San Diego region. And we will be doing lots of outreach, including coming back to this working group and talking about the program guidelines, what opportunities there would be for the tribes and how we can collaborate to do more for our region and for our rural and our tribal areas, in addition to what we would be able to do for some of the more infill focused areas that you saw in Marissa's slides. So I think there's more information to come. The guideline just came out last week. So our staff is taking time to really go through that and make sure we understand so that when we do come and collaborate with you, we can be clear with you exactly on how we could be innovative together.
And just one thing that I will add is that, of the, I think on the slide I had of the draft guidelines public comment period in particular, we're really eager, especially on that rural tribal draft guidelines, if there are any kind of requirements that may be obstacles for tribes to accessing the funds, if there's things that, we can consider there, that is really helpful for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa. Any other comments or questions before we move on to item number 6?
I don't see any other raised hands.
Okay, wonderful. So then we will go on to item 6, which is the Highway Safety Improvement Grant Program. And here to present an overview of this grant is Richard Key from Caltrans headquarters. Richard, I will turn the floor over to you. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Erica. So let's see. Yeah, okay. Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Richard Key with Caltrans Division of Local Assistance, Office of Federal Programs. So today, I'm going to talk about local highway safety improvement program, local HZIP. So when HZIP funding comes to California, we actually split it into 2 pockets. One for state highway system, and then the other is for local agencies and tribes. So this is a local HZIP. Next slide. Yeah, so I will just quickly cover the federal legislation and what agencies are eligible to apply, what projects are eligible to be funded, how it looks like, you know, the statewide HZIP funding amount. Also, we will have a cycle 11 call for projects very soon, so I will talk about that. And for tribes, actually, we have one set aside. Also, I will talk about the implementation of tribal HZIP projects. So next slide. So HZIP program, the purpose is to achieve a significant reduction in traffic fatalities and serious injuries on all public roads, including non-state owned public roads, like local cities and counties, and also roads on tribal land. So that's why we have, that's why I'm here today. So HZIP projects, there are some big criteria. First of all, it must be consistent with Strategic Highway Safety Plan, SHSP. This is a general safety plan that provides a platform statewide for, you know, for reducing traffic fatalities and serious injuries on all public roads. All HZIP projects must be identified through data-driven process, so they target on identified safety issues and eventually reduce fatalities and serious injuries. Next slide. So who can apply? Basically, any local agency who owns, operates, and maintains the public roadways. So cities and counties are our major client, and also tribal governments. So far, we already have a few projects with tribes. Other applicants like universities, school districts may also apply, but we have to review on a case-by-case basis to see if they have, you know, the system or the resources to conduct the projects. The most recent requirement is all applicants must have completed a roadway safety plan, and I believe most tribes have already done that, so that won't be a problem. But for local agencies, cities and counties, we have advertised for a long time, so there have been many agencies have completed safety plans as well, and some of them are working on having one. Next. So for the projects, yeah, so the projects are eligible, you know, as long as the work is on publicly owned roadways or bicycle pathway that corrects or improve the safety issues. So that's the overall, it's very wide open, and we do prefer projects that do not have right-of-way acquisition or complicated environmental impacts. So basically, we want to correct safety issues, as quick as we can. Also, you will see we have a local roadway safety manual, which have a list of 82 safety countermeasures. So all projects must be in line with the safety countermeasures in the manual. Next. So how does the funding picture look like? Altogether, for the last Transportation Act from 2016 to 2021, local HSIP has about $81 million per year. So that's about 40% of the overall HSIP funding for California. And for the new Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the funding actually has been increased significantly. So it's about like 30 or 33% increase. So we will have more funding to fund more safety projects. The other thing new is from 2020, SB 137 allows us to exchange federal funding for state ones. So we can use state funds for many HSIP projects. So the reason is local agencies like to use state funds because the requirements are less. So really the projects can be implemented quicker. Next. So we have made calls for projects about once every 2 years. Last time cycle 10 was in 2020, and this next cycle 11, it will be announced May 9th. So next month, or almost the end of March, right? So, and we have $160 million altogether. So the application process is really easy. You can download application form and also a few other calculation form from our website. And once the application is ready, the submittal process is all electronical, so that it goes quick, and you will receive a email confirmation. So for the applications, we have two big categories. The first one is benefit cost ratio. The majority of the funding is for benefit cost ratio, like 80%. We do have some funding set asides for which we do not require benefit cost ratio calculation. So next slide. So for benefit cost ratio applications, we really rank the applications from the highest benefit cost ratio to the lowest, and then make it a cutoff, to fund to the amount we have. So the highest BCRs will be selected. So how does that work? So benefit, really, you have safety countermeasures and you have crash data. So the benefit can be calculated by reducing the future crashes. And then on the cost side, we have construction cost. And then on top of that, we add PE cost, right-of-way, construction engineering. So that's the total project cost. And then the benefit cost ratio is just the, benefit divided by cost. So tribes, of course, can apply under the benefit cost ratio category. Next. And I think I will skip this slide. This is just a example how the benefit cost ratio is reached. So for funding set asides, we will have 5 funding set asides. Guardrail upgrades. So if you have damaged or out of standard guardrails that's that's under this set aside, and also installing edge lines, $2 million altogether. Pedestrian crossing enhancements, $15 million, and we have bike safety improvements. That's really mainly like a new bike lanes. And we have $2 million for tribes. So that's 250,000 per project. So we can fund altogether at least 8 projects. Next. So
Richard, just
yes.
wanted to quickly, are tribes eligible for any of the other set asides? Because I know that a previous cycle that one of the tribes, I think San Pascual, applied for the guardrail set aside and received that. So are all of this set asides also the tribes are eligible for?
Yes, that is correct. So for this specific set aside for tribes, you can also include anything which are eligible under the other 4 set asides. And also there's a list of low cost safety countermeasures here. So if the total cost is under 250, you can apply under this aside, which really it's the easiest way to get projects funded. Last cycle 10, we also have set aside for tribes, but we do not have, we did not receive any applications. So I really hope we have more projects this time from tribes. Next. So once the projects are selected for funding for tribes, there's different ways to implement. So normally we will sign a master agreement with local agencies. So tribes are welcome to do that, or you can partner with a city or a county like San Diego County, and the county takes the lead. So kind of like this is a county project, but they will work on, implement it. Or you may transfer the funding to BIA, which you need a TTP program agreement with FHWA. So far, I believe all tribal projects choose the first method, transfer funding to BIA. The process is kind of slow, but we hope once it works out, it can be faster. So I think my time is up. So yeah, so basically, if you look at our website, there's a lot of information, including core 4 projects there. The website, I mean, the address is long, but you can just search CA local HZIP. Our website will come up as the first one. Thank you. And if you have questions, please ask.
Thank you, Richard. Are there any member comments or questions before we go into the public comment?
Yes, there are several.
Okay.
The first is Chairman Cope from San Pascual.
Yes.
Good morning. Just to clarify, sir, we applied and were awarded for guardrails back in 2018 with Caltrans, and we have not received anything to date, as well as TTP funds. We have not received those for 19, 20, and 21. So we're at a loss here of what's going on. We've tried to reach out to get some clarification, and we haven't gotten the answers back.
Yes, we are working on the agreement. Actually, I believe for this project, the agreement was sent to the BIA and then waiting for the signature. But for the details, if you can contact Caltrans District 11, they have more details. I know, the agreement needs to be signed by division chief. I think that's already done. Yeah, I believe a lot of time is really on the BIA for the BIA to sign the agreement or they revise the agreement, things like that.
Okay.
Oops.
Rafael, Chairwoman Rafael Reyes has his hands up from District 11.
Hi, Raphael, go ahead.
Hi. Thank you, Richard, for the presentation. I had a question on training for the roadway safety plan. I remember last year there was some online training for agencies, tribes that needed help developing a roadway safety plan. Is that going to be available again, or is there anything planned to assist tribes or any other agencies that need help with that this year?
You mean funding to develop a safety plan?
No, it was just a training, like a webinar. I think it was local assistants that hosted it, but just to you kind of explain the process of developing a roadway safety plan.
Oh, I see. The training webinar. We will have more assistance like this, so it will be posted online. Right now, I do not have any solid dates on that. We will, once the not for the safety plan, but once the project core is announced, we will have a webinar for the program. So that will be like about 2 weeks after May 9th.
Got it. Thank you. And then also for any questions regarding anybody who's waiting on plans like San Pascual, go ahead and reach out to me. I'm going to put my contact in the chat, and we'll follow up and hopefully be able to provide an update on if there's anything Caltrans is waiting on locally, or kind of where we're at in that process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any member comments? Who else has their hand up?
Juan Garcia has his hand up.
Yes, Juan, that's our CFO.
Good morning, Chairwoman. I just had a question for Richard. For cycle 10, I was just kind of curious, what was the average BCR score that you guys awarded funding for? Because I know these are competitive grants, so I'm just kind of curious on what was kind of the BCR score you guys seem to be receiving from applicants and for those applicants that were awarded funding.
Yeah, cycle 10, it was very competitive. So the BCR cutoff was 12, so that's very high. For cycle 9, it was 7.5. But if we're talking about average, I believe the funded applications have an average of BCR like 17, but the lowest to be funded is 12.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just to emphasize the issue that in the tribal set aside that there's no benefit cost analysis required for that pot, correct?
Yes.
And we have there's a hand up in the public. It's Rob Owen.
Rob.
From Caltrans District 11. Go ahead, Rob.
Thank you. I don't seem to have the full functionality of Zoom today. I know they tried to get me to the panelist a couple of times, so thanks. And yeah, I've been working with, I think, the 3 tribes in our district who did get awards a few years ago. San Pascual, I thought, was one that was actually already underway. I'm surprised to hear that, because I think someone mentioned earlier that Andrew's not there anymore, but I spoke to him last year and he said everything was coming along with that project because it's already been signed off. So if there's any concern, we can cycle back with BIA because the funds have supposed to have been released on that. So yeah, we can talk about that offline with whoever the new contact is there at San Pasqual. And I know that's been one of the challenges statewide too, is to kind of get an agreement that works both at the federal and state level, meets a lot of the requirements. So I know it takes a long time to get both BIA and Caltrans to sign those agreements. So I think Verona's still got one in process as well from the last cycle, but by the time this next cycle comes around, we're hopefully have had enough experience to make the implementation process a lot smoother. So I wanted to appreciate everyone's patience with that. Thank you.
Rob, could I ask, you and Richard, either of you, you said that you can do it through the BIA, you can do it through the county. Can you also do it through the MPO or partner with the MPO or not? I know in the Caltrans planning grants you can.
Yes, yes, you can, as long as the MPO agrees to take the lead. Yes.
Good to know.
And Rob, good to see you here. Rob has been working very hard on moving ahead the tribal projects. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming out today, Richard. Appreciate it.
I see that Ray has his hand up. Ray Theron. In the chat, Ray says, I have been informed by BIA that HSIP funds will be included in this year's TTP awards. Is that what you wanted to relay, Ray?
Yeah, he should have, yes, he did said yes.
I appreciate that, Ray. Okay. Anything else, Jane? Anybody else?
I don't see any other hands.
Okay, well, we appreciate you, Richard.
Right, thank you.
So next we'll move on to item number 7. And number 7 is the Interregional Tribal Transportation Strategy Update. And this will be by Precious and also Mike Connolly from SCTCA. I'll turn the floor over to both of you. Precious?
Thank you, Chairwoman, and good morning, everyone. My name is Precious Nicknor. I am a consultant at Kimley Horn, and I had the pleasure of working with Jane Clough and Michael Conley on helping provide the strategy update for the Interregional Tribal Transportation Strategy. Next slide, please. So today we'll be going over the process, effort performed, and then the inventory status, and then I will hand it off to Jane and Michael to talk a little bit more about the early action projects. So we wanted to provide at a glance info of what was done as part of the 2021 strategy update. This is just an infographic to kind of consolidate all the work and progress that was made through the past year. We had, as part of the project, we had 10 interviews with tribes to kind of better understand their transportation needs. We received 7 documents regarding tribal transportation plans and reviewed those. And through the interviews and the documents that we reviewed, we were able to add 62 new projects and modify 40 projects. And so now the inventory has a total of 199 projects in it. We also included an update in regards to the status of the projects to kind of understand where they are in the project development platform process. And so as you can see on the slide, there are various projects that are in concept and planning to preliminary design to final design to construction. And since the 2018 strategy, 5 of the projects have been completed. So next slide, please. So here's just the process and timeline. This is also included in the actual report. We kicked off the process in spring of 2021. It really involved with presenting a kickoff here at the tribal working group last spring. We worked with the different tribes to set up one-on-one interviews with them so that we can determine if the projects in the inventory are up to date or are current or what modifications they needed. We reviewed, provided tribal documents and plans and incorporated any information that needed to be incorporated into the update. In the summer, we updated the inventory and maps and using the tribal feedback. We held a workshop to assess the previous strategies and actions and modified that based on the tribal feedback and what changes the tribes wanted to see. In the fall, we reviewed and updated project costs and helped finalize the inventory and strategies, as well as help develop the tribal early action projects. And then this past winter, we documented that update and into a report. Next slide, please. So just a quick kind of what was done and what steps were taken in order to get the 2021 strategy update completed. We performed a needs assessment. What this needs assessment included the individual meetings, the document scan that I discussed earlier. We updated the project screening tool with new projects and modified projects, as well as updated the cost associated to those projects. We did a strategies assessment where we looked at the strategies and actions from the 2018 strategy and updated based on that, based on tribal feedback, and then developed a methodology to identify early action projects that the tribes could implement in the next few years, and then documented the entire process into a report. Next slide, please. So how was the project inventory updated? Again, interviews with tribes, incorporated those into the inventory. We digitized the location for new and modified projects. We updated the filtering criteria so that there would be, based on different grant criteria, what projects would be eligible, and then incorporated project phasing into the inventory. Next slide, please. So as part of the process, we did a workshop with the tribes to review the strategy and assessment. The workshop consisted of an effectiveness scale, a discussion of what went well and what could be improved on, and then recommended actions for changes in the ITTS update. Next slide, please. We still kept the 4 ITTS strategies with just modifications in the actions. These modifications were provided as red lines to the tribes for review and discussion at the tribal working group, but really consisted into supporting partnerships and collaboration, coordinating collaborative planning, sharing data to support tribal transportation, and then creating opportunities to fund priority tribal transportation projects and programs. Next slide, please. And then here is the list of the tribal early action projects that were identified through the methodology and the discussions that we had with the tribal task force. These were the 4 that were recommended and included in the tribal action early action project that are listed in the report. And now I will hand it off to Mike and Jane for an update on these tribal early action projects.
Thanks, Precious.
Thank you,
Mike,
Precious.
Jane?
Yep, Mike, do you want to go ahead?
Okay. Well, we got these priorities, and we've been working. I've been working with Jane, and we've been going back and forth to try to identify the funding sources and how we will approach them. There was a meeting with between SANDAG and the executive committee of SCTCA and a push to really get some funds allocated so that we can make some significant progress. In particular, the two large-scale projects, I-8 and SR-76, are both projects that they're of a size that it's been difficult to really get them categorized into any of the existing funding sources. They always get pushed ahead because they're too big, and we haven't even really broken them down into what we're talking about as far as the cost and the potential routes that we can pursue funding to address the issues associated with them. So this was an attempt to narrow that down with the funding that we can get through SANDAG, and Jane can break that down some more on how we're getting this funding and how we're allocating it. We're still looking also at the moderate projects, the Church Road and the Apollo Mission Road projects that also came up and were high in the priorities. So, but with those, we're pursuing them through their normal funding route, just trying to push them to a higher priority. So we may not need any of that additional funding. We may be able to focus that on the two larger projects, but we're still early in the process right now. We're also looking at the possibility of reallocating some of our MOU funding to also assist in moving some of those moving those two large projects further ahead. So you want to add on to that, Jane?
Sure, yeah. And so the two projects, the two priority projects that at the top of 25 and 109 are in the regional plan. So with the funding that the challenge that Hassan Akrada, our executive director, CEO, proposed to the tribal nations to try to prioritize the funds, to prioritize the projects, ended up with these two being able to be put into what we call a corridor study, even though they're in the north and the south. So they are now programmed into the next 3 years of SANDAG's budget, with 1.5 million in FY23, 1.5 in FY24, and 2 million in FY25. And so with the collaboration of the SCTCA looking at the MOU funding to do some initial feasibility studies of the two projects, we will then be moving into preliminary engineering for those projects in the coming years. So this is a huge success of having worked with the tribes and having the working group prioritizing the projects and working together to come up with that funding. So we're very excited.
Jane, I just want to add on there. We used to have the two big projects at the top of the chart, but they're switched around now. So it's actually 25 and 108.
Oh, you're right. I think there was another slide where they were. Yes, you're right. The 76 is the corridor 52 for in the regional plan. So 3 of these projects are in the regional plan, and the other 2. I think there's another slide that has. I don't know if you want to move forward. Yeah, go ahead. Go forward. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, so we just talked about that. Oh, here's okay, there they are. And so the other 2 projects are projects that are, even though the ITTS 109 is in the regional plan, it's more associated with Caltrans SHOP funding. And so we'll continue to be working on that. And then the Church Road is something that could potentially be part of the county's CIP at some point. Right now, it's, I believe it's in the general plan, but not in the CIP. So for now, the major emphasis is on the West Willows and the SR 76, breaking those down into manageable projects that can get the work done. So I think that's it.
Well, are there any member comments?
I'm looking, I don't see.
It looks like Chris had a question about are there HSIP eligible type of projects in the strategy update? There are. We went through a process of categorizing projects that are related to safety. And we, as part of the early action project list development, queried the project screening tool for those safety projects. We can resend what those safety projects are so that the group can be informed and take a look at what the improvement types are and see if there's any improvement types that match the tribal set aside or could be potential to being a good HSIP application.
Yep, and that's the the beauty of the ITTS project inventory is that it is in a searchable database and tagged for the different goals of the tribes, including safety. And so it's easy to query the database both for the type of project as well as the funding, how big the project is in terms of the cost. So we can do that easily. And so we'll, for the HSIP, this upcoming HSIP process, we will be taking a look at that and trying to contact the tribes that have projects that we think would be eligible for HSIP, trying to do that proactively.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Precious, and good work, guys. This is one of the success stories, Jane, like you're saying, this is a big success.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, next we're going to move along to item number 8, which is the Regional Digital Equity Strategy. Crystal, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Good morning, working group members. I hope you can all hear me okay. I'm going to look for some nodding heads. Yes, okay, good. So my name is Crystal Ayala. I'm part of the Strategic Partnerships team here within the Planning Department, and really excited to be here sharing an overview of a project that we kicked off a little bit over a year ago now, and that's the development of our Digital Equity Strategy and Action Plan. And so this is something that SANDAG has been involved with for a little bit over a year, as a regional agency that is tasked with advancing many initiatives that support quality of life, connects people and places, as well as our commitment to equity really underscores our involvement in digital equity. Access to internet and technology is just such an essential part of our daily lives and absolutely critical to be able to thrive and benefit from modern society. And in addition to equity, though, and quality of life, technology and high quality broadband is also a really important part of the transportation system. We already rely on technology today to monitor the transportation system. It supports safety, gives us access to trip planning tools, allows us to hail a ride-hailing vehicle. And in the future, we're going to rely on this technology and connectivity just even more. And so as an MPO and a transportation planning agency, SANDAG and our member agencies have a really important role to play in building out the infrastructure that will prepare the region to really take part and lead the region's digital transformation. So as I mentioned, we're involved in this work for a little bit over a year. We became involved shortly after the governor issued the executive order, which directed various state agencies to expand high-speed broadband statewide. The state developed their own broadband action plan. And in January of last year, our board of directors took note of that and adopted a resolution committing SANDAG to take a key role in closing the digital divide. And so we formed a digital divide task force, which consists of many stakeholders, public, private, community-based organizations, internet service providers sit on that stakeholder group. And I do want to give a shout out to Matt Rantanen from the Tribal Digital Village and SCTCA for being a really active participant and member of the task force. So one of our key tasks, once we convened our task force, was to conduct a regional broadband gap analysis to understand where the gaps in infrastructure are and what those disparities for service exist. And around that time, the state and the federal government passed some really monumental bills that, in short, are bringing billions of dollars to expand broadband infrastructure and services statewide. So, just want to take a moment there to highlight the importance of the work that the region is doing now to ensure that we have a collective and unified voice in competing for those state and federal funds, and really elevate the position of the region in competing well. So all of this work last year culminated in the development and adoption of our digital equity strategy and action plan by the board of directors. And I'll talk about a few of the early actions we have underway to expand broadband access and adoption, and efforts we'd love to partner with the tribes on. But before I do so, I want to spend a quick few minutes going over the state of the digital divide in the region. And I'm going to quickly breeze through this because I know you have a full agenda, but because infrastructure is such a key part of the puzzle, just want to highlight how the broadband network is laid out. It's very similar to transportation. It's made up of a lot of links and connections. First and foremost, we have a fiber optic backbone, and that really provides that underlying foundation for the infrastructure. Then we have the middle mile component, which takes that fiber optic backbone and connects it to an ISP, internet service provider's hub. And then that last mile piece, much like transportation, can be provided by a variety of technologies and means. So that's where you might see a wireless solution, a DSL cable, or fiber being used to provide internet to your home or your business. Now, some of this information may not be new, but what we found through our regional broadband gap analysis is that access to broadband service is just not ubiquitously available throughout the county. Many households in our rural and our tribal areas, as many of you are intimately familiar with, have limited or no access to fixed broadband at all. This map here shows census blocks that have access to fixed broadband service. The caveat here with this data set is that if a provider can service one household within an entire census block, the CPUC acknowledges that as being served, right? So that can lead to quite a bit of overestimating, overreporting broadband accessibility. But nonetheless, you can really see how there's significant disparities between the households that live in our urbanized parts of the county and those that live in the unincorporated parts of the county. And even if service is available, there's many factors that will influence a household's ability to get connected, and affordability by far is one of the most significant barriers to adoption. And that really disproportionately impacts our low-income communities. Older adults, Black, Hispanic, and tribal households as well also experience lower broadband adoption. And as I mentioned, this is in large part due to the cost of the service. In some parts of the county, in our unincorporated areas, the lowest price plan for internet starts at $90 a month. That's the lowest price plan. And that really just highlights how unattainable an internet connection can be for a household that is facing many other challenges. And the affordability issue is really an outcome of the little market competition that we see in the county. Most of the region is served by one or maybe two providers. But if you live in our unincorporated parts of the county, your choice of service is really limited. As I mentioned, fiber is a really key part of the infrastructure network today. And what you're seeing here on this map are census blocks where private fiber infrastructure is present or passing through a census block. We can't use this information to determine whether fiber is being used to actually provide internet. It simply illustrates that fiber is present through that area. But it does help to paint a really good picture of where there are gaps in infrastructure in that backbone and that middle mile network. Infrastructure is missing in many of our unincorporated parts, and there's some holes in our urbanized parts of the county as well. And this map really helps to illustrate how some communities in our region may have been impacted by what's called digital redlining, in which service providers have neglected to invest in certain communities that may not offer a quote high return on investment. But in addition to private sector fiber, many agencies, public agencies, tribes have invested in your own fiber to connect your facilities. What you're seeing here is the transportation ring that the transportation agencies in the region have built to be used exclusively right now for transportation purposes. But we can use public infrastructure like this to bring smaller, more internet service providers to the table, lease out some of the capacity in the system and help reduce costs for many households. And another strategy we can use to expand fiber infrastructure is by using what's known as a dig once approach. We're already doing this now in partnership with the County of San Diego and Caltrans along the State Route 67. We learned that Caltrans was planning to repave 18 miles from Lakeside to Ramona, and thought what a great opportunity to add conduit and fiber to fill a really key gap, as you can see here in the network. And so that project is moving forward and will be breaking ground in just a few months. Making better use of our public infrastructure and developing policies that are future thinking and really focus the investments in underserved communities are really key strategies for us moving forward. What you see here on the slide are the 7 key strategies in our digital equity strategy and action plan, and really kind of underpins our approach for how we intend to work with many stakeholders to expand broadband access and adoption statewide. All right, so we're advancing a lot of early actions already in partnership with many stakeholders, and I want to highlight just a few key ones that we'd love to collaborate and continue partnering with the tribes on. And I just want to say that we'd love to come back in a future meeting to share progress or host a workshop or a more focused discussion on how we can collaborate with the tribes to expand broadband. So one of the most significant challenges to deploying broadband is permitting. Today in the region, every local jurisdiction handles this differently, and information on how to permit broadband and the policies around broadband are really not easily accessible. And so to help tackle this, we've convened a task force of staff from our local jurisdictions, and we've also invited the SETCA and tribes to participate in this group. And the intent is to develop a regional model and policy framework for how we can expedite the deployment of this infrastructure in areas where there are gaps. So this group is going to be helping us come up with key policies and standardized templates and approaches for how we might permit broadband in a more coordinated and consistent manner throughout the region, and developing some of those partnership considerations so that as we're partnering with the private sector for deploying broadband, we're thinking holistically and comprehensively about how to make the best use of the infrastructure. One of the key strategies for expediting permitting and making better use of public infrastructure is by making that infrastructure available to others for their use. So we can do this by licensing our conduit or sharing fiber with external agencies, public or private. And so to help create a regionally consistent approach for doing this, we've developed a few templates to help public agencies, tribes better make use of existing digital infrastructure assets. So these templates were developed in partnership with our legal counsel and are currently available for entities to use and start leveraging for sharing assets with the private sector and public agencies. We're also drafting a dig once policy currently, and what this would do is essentially require the installation of conduit and fiber as part of SANDAG funded projects in areas where there are gaps. So really taking what we've done with the State Route 67 and expanding that so that it's a regionally consistent policy and approach. And what this means is that as we're doing road work, as we're undergrounding utilities, we can be really proactive in installing that conduit and installing that fiber so that we are ready to use that for transportation and for broadband purposes. So as tribes are advancing some of the early action projects that we just heard about in the Interregional Tribal Transportation Strategy, that's a great opportunity to see if there's an opportunity to also integrate conduit and fiber as part of these projects that will serve a dual purpose: connect the transportation system, allow you to implement intelligent transportation solutions, and also be used to provide broadband service in areas that are currently underserved. And there's also a huge cost and time savings component associated with the dig once approach. On the 67, we're able to save a little over $5 million. So just an example of how being proactive and intentional in planning for the infrastructure, how that can realize a lot of benefits. Now, this isn't a SANDAG-led effort, but we are coordinating with the state on their statewide open access middle mile network. This is a result of one of those legislative bills that I mentioned earlier in the presentation, Senate Bill 156, amongst other things, tasked the California Department of Technology, the Public Utilities Commission, and Caltrans with planning, designing, and constructing and operating a statewide open access middle mile network. So planning for this network is currently underway, but just last November, the state announced that a few locations were moving forward for advanced planning. And 4 of those corridors are actually in the San Diego County. You can see those here in purple in the PowerPoint presentation. And we're coordinating locally with our counterparts at Caltrans to help advance the delivery of these middle mile projects. And as you can see from the map here, when complete, these segments are going to provide a lot of last mile connections and opportunities for homes and businesses on tribal lands. So we'd love to continue exploring how we can work with all of you to identify some of those last mile opportunities. What you're seeing here is an opportunity from the PUC that will be opening in just a few months. And this is a program that provides technical assistance funding for local agencies and for tribes. So this provides up to $500,000 per year per applicant. And this funding can be used to fund needs assessments, broadband network design, opportunities. And so we'd love to work with the tribes and see how we can support you in pursuing some of these funds and advance a lot of the work that many of you are involved with. And just to wrap up my presentation on the adoption side of things, we're also advancing some key efforts here. One of the there are many resources available to support digital equity and make internet services more affordable. And one of the primary ones is the FCC's Affordable Connectivity Program. So as you can see here, it provides a monthly discount for broadband services. And we'd like to increase awareness and enrollment in this program in the region. And we'll be releasing a Get Connected campaign in just a few weeks to raise awareness. We will be developing a community partner toolkit so that we can work with our partners to share this information, raise awareness of all of the resources, and also be doing direct outreach in communities that have low broadband adoption rates today. So really trying to focus the outreach to reach households that will benefit most from some of these digital equity resources. And because a lot of our outreach today is digitally focused, we're really excited to be partnering with 211 on this campaign so that community members can also easily just call 211 to access more information and get connected with some of these great resources and programs. We'll be sharing more about this outreach and some other efforts we have underway at our next Digital Divide Task Force meeting. You are all welcome to attend. We'd happily send the information via Jane and the group. The meeting will be taking place Wednesday, April 13th, and you can stay up to date and learn more about our strategy, our action plan, dive into our data a little bit deeper by visiting our Digital Divide story map. And if you have any questions, love to continue collaborating with all of the tribes and would welcome any additional discussions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Crystal. Are there any member comments or questions for Crystal?
Ray has his hand up. Oh, it's okay. He's put in the chat, please have your task force contact the BIA since they regulate utility activity on reservations.
Thank you, Ray.
Anybody else, any other members before we go on to the public comments?
Let's see. No. And I don't see any hands raised in the public either.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it, Crystal. We're going to move on to item number 9, which is the Hamul Climate Vulnerability for Transportation Study. And this is my CFO, Juan Garcia, and also EPA Director, Cindy Smallwood. I'll turn the floor over to both you, Juan and Cindy. Please take it away.
Good morning. My name is Cindy Smallwood. I'm the Environmental Director for the Hamul Indian Village of California. Thank you for having us here this morning.
And my name is Juan Garcia, as Chairman said, Chief Financial Officer, Grants Manager with Hamul Indian Village. And we're obviously going to talk to you guys today about the Tribal Transportation Climate Adaptation Project. And this was a project, of course, that was a collaborative effort, but for Cindy and I, we were heavily involved with the planning and helping the documentation for this grant. So
our, you want to go to the next slide?
yeah, or you can go to the next slide. I don't have control of it.
Oh, you don't have control. I have no control.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. So I'd like to give you some information on the project overview. This was a collaborative grant with the Paula Band of Mission Indians using a state-funded Caltrans SB1 Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant. The grant was funded for $375,000. We hired consultants, Prosper Sustainability and Kimley Horn. We started with a vulnerability assessment, and the first thing that we did was we formed a planning team, and this consisted of the tribal council, some of our tribal community members, the tribal government staff, some casino staff, and our project partners, Prosper Sustainability and Kimley Horn. We gathered, analyzed, and mapped relevant exposures and impact, excuse me, and impacts of the vulnerabilities and strategies. Then we ranked those top vulnerabilities for high-risk climate exposures using a custom evaluation criteria and drafted and finalized the vulnerability assessment. This created an 80-page document. After that, we started on the adaptation plan. Once again, working with the planning team to develop and rate top strategies to address vulnerabilities, and then evaluate and outline the initial work plans for each selected strategy. The tribe selected 2 strategies, each for advanced planning, including preliminary engineering and design work. Then we were able to draft and finalize the adaptation plan reports. This document became a 222-page document. Another important component to this document is that we worked to align it with other documents that the Environmental Protection Department already had written. These documents were things like non-point source and emergency operations plans, but also plans that we are just starting to write, such as our comprehensive climate adaptation plan and drought plan. We also, next slide, please. Thank you. Our vulnerability study findings were climate exposures that were relevant to transportation systems. The top three were temperature extremes, wildfire, and storms and flooding.
You want to go to the next one? So just as Cindy had mentioned, right, our vulnerability study highlighted three particular ones for Hamul. And as you can see, we kind of have a small map there. You know, I apologize, a little small there, but just to give kind of a bit of a visual here. But with some of the concerns we had, of course, the biggest concern is that, you know, the reservation is along State Route 94, right? It's the main ingress and egress. And so some of the biggest things, right, challenges with temperatures, wildfires, and storms, of course, is the limited access for emergency service vehicles, right? Fire, ambulances, even police as well, the limitation there. We've also identified that, you know, because of these vulnerabilities, right, it would, of course, potentially could have an impact to limited access of drinking water, as well as could have potential increased costs for tribal government in the form of either road repairs or damages to, you know, roadways. The biggest, of course, and the most impactful would be the casino itself, since it sits on on the reservation along State Route 94, right? That could have a major impact. And at times we have seen that it has, with these environmental vulnerabilities, have created some impacts. So. And then, of course, you know, obviously stormwater is something that we have to consider too when we're looking at these as well. Next slide. So that was just kind of a high level of kind of the vulnerabilities that we had addressed. And so kind of in the next steps, this being a planning grant, is the advanced planning and actually coming up with a action plan or advanced plan of kind of, you know, next steps. And so we've addressed two particular areas that, you know, through the grant and through the documents that we probably would want to look to at least address initially. One of them is this along State Route 94, just south of the casino and south of the reservation. There's a wildlife, there's a wildlife crossing route or route that we would try and look to implement. And as you can see from the first picture, it does get flooded quite frequently, given the fact that the culverts there are constantly getting clogged up and stuff like that. So that could be one area that we see as a major concern, that if we can get that fixed, right, we would have the ability to hopefully keep that road open instead of having constant closures for that road. So Kimley Horn was able to kind of put together some documentation, engineering, some estimates for construction costs. So obviously down the road, when we look to, hopefully if there's another grant available that we can get some funding for, you know, we have this this documentation to help us with. Next slide. And then just the next one and last one, this is a culvert and road widening improvement along Melody Road. And so again, similar, you know, with addressing stormwater and addressing some of the concerns with flooding and stuff like that. This is another area that is in dire need of improvements and renovations of such. So we have put together an action plan of putting a planning, permitting, and design and construction on that. Cindy?
And also, this one is significant because of the effect that the improvement would have on water quality. So this one is very important. And also the adaptation plan, I wanted to say that Kimley Horn had added to the document. The improvement plan has the drawings and the cost estimates for these improvements are also included in the document. So that's also extremely helpful.
So to kind of on the last slide, we go to the last slide, but just kind of sum everything up here. Again, this is another document, another tool that, you know, Hamul will have as it continues to assess and analyze its roadways and determine priorities and figure out improvements for those roadways. So these grants, this Caltrans grant that we had received is beneficial. And we just wanted to share that with the folks here on the call. Anyone have any questions?
Are there any member comments or questions?
Sorry, I don't see any hands raised.
What about any public comments or questions?
No, I don't see any hands raised in the public.
Okay, well, thanks, Juan, and thanks, Cindy. Appreciate your work on this.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
I'll see you guys soon.
Yes.
We're on our final agenda item. This is the San Vicente Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan. Melina of Caltrans and Mimi from Sandag.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Good morning, everyone. My name is Melina Pereira, and I'm the Caltrans Project Manager for the San Vicente Multimodal Comprehensive Corridor Plan. Mimi Morisaki, the Sandag Project Manager, is also here to provide an update on the CMCP. Thank you for inviting us to present to you today. Also, a big thank you to Shayla Alvarez from the Barona tribe. She has participated on our stakeholder working group for the CMCP. Next slide, please. So here's a quick overview of today's discussion. First, we will provide some background on the CMCP process and related corridor efforts. After that, we will provide an overview of existing conditions within the corridor. Finally, we'll review key needs identified by our initial analysis and present our project inventory. And then we will conclude with a review of next steps and ways that you can stay involved with the CMCP. As a brief orientation to the corridor, this slide presents the study area and the area of influence for this plan. The study area, represented by the slightly darker color on the map, is the focus of our proposed transportation solutions, and the draft project inventory we are presenting today will fall within this area. The surrounding lighter color on the map is the area of influence and represents the area that will likely be impacted by proposed improvements. So this is one of 5 ongoing CMCPs, and then we have a 6th CMCP, which is the I-8, starting in the next few weeks. Next slide. So the CMCP is being developed in parallel to several other ongoing efforts to improve the San Vicente corridor. So on the first click, you will see the PA&ED effort will focus most heavily on enhancing operations and will improve the safe and efficient movement of people and goods using various modes of travel during both typical highway operations and emergencies such as wildfires. Project objectives also include encouraging active transportation, providing multimodal options such as bike paths and/or lanes where feasible, facilitating recreational and wildlife movement along and across the route, and preserving the human and natural environment along 67. The PA&ED effort will help advance the San Vicente CMCP high-level concepts within the project limits to the feasibility phase, design, and implementation in the short term. So this will help the corridor compete for transportation project funding in the San Diego region. So Crystal Ayala from Sandag just talked about this project in her Digital Equity Strategy and Action Plan presentation. The SR67 Fiber Communications and Pavement Rehabilitation Project proposes to repair and improve the overall ride quality on 18.4 miles of travelway and shoulders on 67 from just north of the San Diego River Bridge and Lakeside to 78 and 10th Street in Ramona. The California Transportation Commission has approved the installation of broadband capabilities as part of the project, which will be done simultaneously with the repaving, which will help expand affordable broadband for residents. This project is scheduled to begin construction in the spring of 2022 and complete construction in the fall of 2023 with a total capital cost of $39 million. So the Coast Canyons and Trails CMCP study area includes SR 52 and portions of 67. It overlaps at the southernmost point of the San Vicente CMCP, and we are coordinating with that corridor team, especially where the two CMCPs overlap. And finally, the ITTS, or the Interregional Tribal Transportation Strategy Update, is an additional ongoing project the corridor team is aware of. Recommendations and projects from the ITTS are being incorporated into this CMCP. So this slide provides an overview of where we are in the CMCP process. The first section on the left highlights where we were when we last met with this group. At that time, we had presented to you a set of community identified needs that fed the needs assessment for this corridor. And at the time, we also were working with the subject matter experts and the stakeholder working group to finalize our list of 7 needs for the corridor. So since then, the project team has developed the draft project inventory, which was designed as a competitive wish list or universe of projects. And this list includes existing plans and projects for the study area, projects identified by the community through the public outreach efforts, and projects identified by the project team and subject matter experts in response to the challenges and needs we've heard. So we're now in this third stage where we just closed the public comment period on the draft project inventory, and we're starting to sort through the comments. The feedback we received will inform the development of the final project inventory. So after incorporating your feedback, we will focus on the following evaluations for each of the projects. High-level feasibility assessment. So how feasible is this project in the San Vicente corridor? Performance measure evaluation. How does each project rank when considering specific metrics like equity, accessibility, and climate? Project bundling evaluation, with the main purpose of the corridor allowing for multimodality. How can certain projects be bundled or combined to produce the most efficient means of transportation? And then high-level cost estimates. How much will each of these projects cost? So the projects that pass this test, so to speak, will be retained as projects in the CMCP document. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mimi from SANDAG to discuss the needs assessment.
Thank you, Melina. So this is the list of the needs that were identified and analyzed for the CMCP. There are a couple things to note about this list. One, this is not all encompassing of ideas, themes, and goals that were considered and interwoven throughout the projects, such as community connections in Lakeside, creating a Main Street feel in Ramona, and increasing equitable access to transportation. There's no one solution that will resolve any one problem on the corridor. It's a program or series of projects that will collectively address the needs. And I should also mention that these needs are all very integrated with each other. Each project doesn't address just one need, but each project was assigned to a primary need category for the sake of this project inventory. For example, an active transportation project typically increases safety for the vulnerable users, and many of the utilities projects enhance information accessibility. These needs were the guide for developing transportation solutions that we'll be covering in the following project inventory slides. So while safety was considered in the development of all projects in this inventory, this suite of projects identified are directly focused on addressing specific safety issues. And since we know that speeding is an issue on the corridor, we've identified a couple of areas that could benefit from traffic calming measures, such as Willow Road, Poway Road, and Main Street in Ramona, as well as 2 of those locations we've identified for speed studies to potentially reduce the posted speed limit. There's also an area along the Poway segment where a center left turn lane would be helpful with preventing future head-on collisions. And we've identified sharp curve areas where curve safety treatments would be beneficial. Lastly, we're showing locations that were identified in the San Diego State University's wildlife movement study for improved or potentially new crossings. And other corridor-wide safety improvements that are identified in the CMCP include increased wayfinding, smart parking systems at the trailheads so that visitors can plan ahead rather than searching for parking on the corridor, improved vegetation management strategies to increase driver visibility, DMS signs that will help with safety campaign messaging, design improvements for safe recovery areas, and evaluation of existing guardrail improvement needs or gap closures. So there's a lot of content in this map and the following maps. So as a reminder, these maps are available to you in the agenda attachment. This is our evacuation analysis and recommended projects. The main project here is showing the extent of the PAED project limits, Lakeside to Highland and Dye intersection. What we're indicating here is that the CMCP will support the recommended alternative that comes out of the PAED alternatives analysis. We're also showing the locations of tow truck deployment and evacuation staging areas, and a recommendation for parking removal near the major trailheads, and recommended fire access roads along Mina de Oro and Foster Truck Trail for easier access for emergency responders. We also considered active transportation in our analysis. This map shows the remaining pedestrian-specific projects, aside from those including Lakeside, with sidewalk enhancements on Mapleview, traffic calming on Willow Road, and intersection enhancements at various major intersections. And in Ramona, sidewalk enhancements on Archie Moore Road for safer connections to the parks and schools, traffic calming on Main Street, pedestrian enhancements on Ramona Street and Hanson Lane for access to the high school, and intersection enhancements at various major intersections, some of which are being taken care of as part of the Clean California project. And please note that these multi-use paths are shown in the bike improvements map, and the equestrian trails, which we'll show in the equestrian map, can also be used by pedestrians. For equestrians, we've identified a couple of key connections in the study area based on the Ramona and Lakeside Trails master plans that were important connections for the study area as a whole, including along the east side of Moreno Avenue and Vigilante Road, San Vicente Avenue across SR 67, the area south of Willow Road connecting to Vine Street, under Scripps Poway Parkway and across SR 67, connecting Poway and the reservoir area, and a connection between Northern Poway and Ramona via Highland Valley Road and a route north of Main Street. These trails are assumed to be soft surface trails, and while we anticipate the trails could double as pedestrian space and potential wildlife crossing locations, we've heard from the communities that horses sharing space with bicyclists is not ideal. Therefore, we've made an effort to separate those two users. Ideally, they would have separate dedicated routes, but at a minimum, they would be separated by a landscape strip. So Melina will finish the conversation with goods movement, traffic congestion, and utilities.
Thank you, Mimi. So on this slide, as you can see, traffic congestion and goods movement are highly related because trucks sitting in traffic can lead to economic loss of goods movement. Many of the traffic congestion projects shown later in this presentation will also benefit goods movement, but we pulled out a couple of projects from the traffic congestion map to specifically cater to goods movement, including truck climbing or passing lanes on the on the segments of Wildcat Canyon Road near the high school, truck runaway ramps in the Recreation Ridge and Climb segments. This is another example of a project that will address multiple needs, including safety and goods movement. So for addressing key bottlenecks, we're proposing intersection control evaluations at various intersections. This could mean performing a signal warrant analysis at currently unsignalized intersections or evaluating other alternative designs for existing signalized intersections. We're also proposing wayfinding signage mentioned previously during the safety section which will help with traffic congestion by allowing people to more easily navigate to their desired destination. Turnout viewpoints will help avoid people rubbernecking while driving. We've also paired these places with bike fix-it stations and call box locations. So the frontage road along Wine Country will help with consolidating driveways and minimizing left turn movements on this section. The new roadway connection in the Recreation Ridge segment will allow direct access from 67 to Dos Picos County Park and other destinations without having to go all the way up and around the corridor. The smart intersection systems will provide vehicle communication capabilities, signal timing coordination, and transit priority. So for increasing alternative modes, we're proposing the new fixed route service connecting Ramona and Poway via Scripps Poway Parkway to serve major employment centers and local destinations, a community connector route with flexible fleet service providing pickup drop-off transportation in designated zones in Ramona and Lakeside, and then a neighborhood shuttle proposed for connecting key destinations within Lakeside and connecting key destinations along the Ramona and Wine Country segments, and then a rideshare program serving the study area communities to access the Barona Resort and Casino and key desired destinations in Lakeside and Ramona. So the broadband access providing broadband service will require partnership with broadband providers and other entities. The following projects will incorporate conduit sharing, a joint use trenching to provide the infrastructure for future deployment of broadband, which will help reduce vehicle miles traveled or VMT by implementing transportation demand management strategies such as teleworking. The ongoing micro-trenching project along 67 between the San Diego River Bridge and Highland Valley Road will add fiber optic telecommunication infrastructure to serve communities east of the 67 study area. The San Vicente CMCP proposes to extend the utilities infrastructure from Highland Valley Die Road through the Ramona community to provide conduit infrastructure for future broadband service. Almost done. We recognize that the information technology need category is really a supporting need, and you've probably already heard a lot of the projects in other needs, but we've listed a couple here for ways that information and technology support the 6 other needs. And then the last slide. We would like to encourage you all and your respective communities to visit the San Vicente CMCP Virtual Engagement Hub to learn more about this CMCP. We are listening and we hope to share this information. We hope you will share this information with your neighbors, colleagues, and families to help get the best community representation possible. To reach us at any time, you can scan the QR code on the slide and feel free to reach out by email, call, or text. And once again, thank you for having us at your working group meeting today.
Thank you, Melina. Thank you, Mimi. Jane, can you check to see if there are any member comments? If so, raise your hand, turn your video on, questions or comments from the members.
I don't see any hands raised or public comment either.
No public comments either. Okay, wonderful. So that takes us to the end of our agenda if there are no public comments or questions. And hopefully you all have your calendar out. Because our meetings are quarterly, our next working group meeting will be June 29th. Can you check your calendars to make sure that works for everybody? And please submit to Jane or I topics for the next technical working group meeting. Any other closing comments or questions for anybody? Antoinette, anything to add?
No, thank you very much. Great meeting. Lots of good content. Looking forward to meeting in person in June.
Absolutely. Okay, with that, then we'll conclude our meeting. May the Creator continue to watch your communities and watch over your families. And we'll see you in a few months. Everybody have a great day. Take care.